Good evening and welcome back to the second film in our Antigone film series. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Andrés Fabián Henao Castro. I am an assistant professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and until recently the postdoctoral fellow of the Academy of Global Humanities and Critical Theory at the University of Bologna. The Antigone film series is a project co-sponsored by the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke University in collaboration with the Screen Society, Duke's successful public film programming body, and is also being supported by the Josiah Charles Trent Memorial Foundation Endowment Fund and co-sponsored by several departments at Duke. So let me take this opportunity to thank them all and to extend particularly big thanks to Ranji, Chris and Sarah at FHI and also to Hank at Screen Society who have worked tirelessly to bring this film series to you. And just let me say that it's just a pleasure to work with them all in any project actually. The Antigone film series is actually part of a larger initiative of the Antigone Working Group that included a reading group in the spring and summer of this year and will be hosting an international colloquium on the literary and theoretical reception of Antigone in the world in the fall of next year. I would also like to take this opportunity to advertise Theatre of Words' production of Antigone in Ferguson, a project in which now Duke is involved through the active role of Professor Erika Weiberg. So big kudos to Professor Weiberg for making this accessible to all of us. You can find information to that event and to the next two films and also the colloquium, all of that in our website, so please keep in touch and check. Today I will be introducing The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, Tommy Lee Jones' first film, released in 2005, and the product of Jones' collaboration with famous screenwriter Guillermo Arriaga. I will try to keep my remarks short so that you can go and enjoy the film. Later on, we're going to have a conversation with FHI director Professor Ranji Khanna, and then we'll open up to you questions. The film is said to have been inspired by the extrajudicial killing of Ezequiel Hernandez Jr. by the Marines in the border, but unlike Ezequiel Hernandez, Melquiades Estrada is actually represented in the film as an undocumented immigrant of Mexican origin who is killed by the border patrol. I highlight Melquiades Estrada's status because, as it was the case for women in Athens whose political exclusion extended to their representational exclusion from official cultural production, as in the case of the Festival of Dionysia where Antigone was first performed, that is the case too with undocumented immigrants in the US today. Like Antigone, who was played by a male actor in the stage, as women were not allowed to perform, and according to some classical Greek scholars, they were not even allowed to attend the festival as a spectator. Melquiades Estrada is actually not played by an undocumented immigrant. He is played by Julio Cedillo, who is a Mexican-American one and legally allowed to play the role. The second connection that I would like to emphasize is that pretty much like Polynices in Greek antiquity, who ends up receiving 3 burials, Melquiades Estrada also is buried 3 times in this film. But unlike what happens in the ancient classical Greek tragedy, Polynices is not subversively buried by Antigone. In this film, in The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, our version of Antigone, who is Pete Perkins, subversively exhumates the body of Melquiades Estrada, as the sudden injury happens not through non-burial exposure, as in the case of Sophocles' Antigone, but through burial itself. And we should perhaps think about that for the Q&A. The corpse, which Julia Kristeva defines as perhaps the most radical figure of abjection to the extent that it undoes the stability of borders, above all the border between the living and the dead, confronts us in this film with the inescapably politically contested nature of that border, as not only the corpse but the territory itself in which Melquiades would like to be buried is in question, and it is inseparable from colonial histories of erasure. I am referring to the territory of the Coahuiltecan nation, indigenous territory that was then occupied during the Spanish conquest of the Americas and then not returned when Mexico achieved independence from Spain, and then also not returned when the US gained control over that territory after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the US-Mexican War of 1846-1848 that costed Mexico half of its territory. Now, to that we should add the increasing transformation of migration from a socioeconomic issue of labor regulation in the US to a problem of national security. something that becomes increasingly evident through policies by both the Republican and the Democratic parties in the second half of the 20th century, which changed quite considerably in the nature of the border. That includes now the so-called war on drugs, a militarized apparatus, a fence like a border, an extension of the prison industrial complex that includes now detention centers for immigrants, and a new administrative status that further marginalizes the situation of these immigrants in these detention centers, now also privatized, and an apparatus, huge apparatus of deportability that also includes criminalization of immigrants both on policy and public discourse. So it is against this policing background that I invite you to ponder on the existence or not of Jimenez, and also on the potentially homoerotic relationship that one can discern between Pete Perkins and Melquiades Estrada, in a kind of necrophiliac form of love that challenges settled colonial heteronormativity, and that echoes also the ways in which Antigone has been used quite productively in queer theory to criticize modalities of desire. So I'm going to leave my remarks there. As you can see, there's a lot to discuss for us. Enjoy the film, and we'll be back for the Q&A. Thank you.